Today, I'm going to talk about this crossover topics, what selling soap and software taught me about advocacy. So how did I cross over from what I used to do? So most of you know me as a food writer. I write for Pittsburgh Magazine, and I write about healthy food. But I also write about kind of more innovative, new things that are happening in our food world. And I also write for Next Pittsburgh. Again, I write about health a lot, but I also, for Next Pittsburgh, mostly write about innovation. And I think this is the crosshairs that I feel like is where my sweet spot is. It's in food and innovation, and these are my two very passionate interests. Some people refer to me as a chef, and I always want to correct them because I have very, very high respect for some chefs, and I think that they're true artists. So I think I call myself more of an advocate, and I advocate for food issues that I feel like need a lot of attention. I mean, there's so many things wrong and so many things in the world that we can improve, but where I feel like I make a good contribution is when I talk about food and health. So let me talk about where I began. So I'm not a trained chef, I'm not a trained writer either, so none of that applies. That's why I hesitate to take those titles. But I'm actually, I'm a business major. I went to business school, and then I had my first internship at Procter & Gamble. Who knows what Procter & Gamble is? Yes, everyone knows. Who went to business school here? Right. So you know that's one of the plumbest internships you can get, product management. And during the time I went to college, the internet wasn't a thing. Don't start calculating. So product management was the thing. And I worked, that was where my internship was fantastic. I loved it. And when you're an intern at Procter & Gamble, you don't fetch coffee. You're given like real jobs. You're given real projects. You get really measured toward the end of that project, which was good because I wasn't, I really didn't want to fetch coffee. And then after college, I worked for Colgate-Palmolive, which is Procter & Gamble's competitor. And the reason I did that was Cincinnati, New York. So Colgate is based in New York City, although I worked in Asia Pacific. And I was really excited. I was 21. I knew I was going to have, this was one of the best jobs that a business major could ever want. And I was really, really excited. And I worked in, as I mentioned, product management. How many of you know what product management is? So when you're a product manager, you're like the CEO of your little fiefdom, which is your brand. You're not performing one function. You're handling a brand, you're handling a product, and you're handling the P&L for it. So you're responsible from sales all the way down to expenses. So you want to maximize sales and you want to control expenses. And that's how you're evaluated. You're evaluated on your bottom line. And so you worry about marketing and selling your product, but you also worry about cutting costs, efficiencies, and you drive your whole team. So I was a 21-year-old driving maybe like 10 team members from advertising agencies to finance people to R&D people to production people, and then making sure that the brand was working. The brand I handled was Ajax. How exciting! So, I was like, oh my God, I have Ajax, that's so great. And So, this is my brand. And at that time, where I was working in Asia, Ajax was a fledgling brand. It was number 8 in the market. And the task that I was given was, okay, this is do or die. You resurrect this brand or this brand gets nixed. So number 8 wasn't very profitable, was a big cost center. And the behemoth in the market was Tide. Even more exciting. So, my world was in detergents, and it sounds so, just so broad and just uninteresting. But at that time, this was very, very exciting to me because the question was, how was I going to make this brand survive? And when you're in product management, you know that the customer is king. Everything is focused on the customer. You take a look at the customer and you have to understand that person. And then you start designing the elements of what your product will be. How will you win? So every little thing in that package that you pick up from the shelf is something that's been highly researched, quantitative surveys costing millions of dollars. And from the color of the cap, the color of the packaging, what the formula is, how it smells. Did you know that there's 3 flavors and big flavors and fragrances companies in the world that control everything you smell and taste? 3 of them. IFF, Givaudan Rohr, and Takasago. So those are where all your flavors and fragrances come from the chips to when you smell your candle or whatever it is. And down to the branding. You think that those little elements, like stronger than the toughest stains, were just put there. 1,000 people were asked, what does that mean to you? Stronger than the toughest stains. I don't know. Down to the color, what does that swooshy thing mean to you? It's so interesting. It's like, really? We want to know what 1,000 people think? And, and then, the one product wins. This is how we keep pollers employed, as well as politics, I guess. And all of those are polled and asked and confirmed and etc. The other perspective that you take when you're designing your product is what's out there in the market, and that's, you try to position it against what's already existing. So you take a look at your target market and you take a look at what exists, and then you design your product kind of against that. And then again, like I said, pull many, 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 many people. And then you decide how you're going to sell it. Advertising, right? It's gentle, something you touch, or something that touches you. It's not about detergent anymore suddenly, right? There's so much emotion that goes in this now. And that transformation is, I think, the magic of advertising, right? It's no one sells you straight up what the formula is. This has, 4 parts, HSO4, whatever it is. They sell you something that you feel some sort of emotional connection to. An interesting story about those kind of labels in the bottom about with the kind of the stamps of approval. So one of the things that, and this is my favorite brand management story, one of the things that consumer focus groups and research were showing is that they don't trust Ajax. It's a number 8 brand. Where you are, am I going to buy you? So in one meeting, I remember saying, well, then let's put a seal of approval. Let's get a seal. And then it's too late because we were launching in a month. How are we going to get some association to do it? And next thing I knew, we had an association, the American Cotton Association. Look it up. It's hard to find now. For some reason, somewhere in Madison Avenue, the American Cotton Association appeared and was stamped on the product. So we had that seal. Magic. And, the trust issue was circumvented. Again, you look at what Tide's doing and you kind of test it against that as well. So what happened? The next thing after designing your product and designing your advertising, and this is something that most people don't know, is that you figure out how to actually get that product to your consumer. Okay, down from Walmart down to every little bodega in the corner. And that's not easy, because you're spending all this money on advertising. You're messaging, you're pulling at your heartstrings when they watch TV. When they go to that store in that instance that they need to buy detergent, again, you have to make sure you're there, otherwise you lose your customer. And you wasted all that money. So you reach as many people as possible, you distribute, right? That's the part that not a lot of people think about. So I'm going to just run through that again. You get your brand, you look at your customer, you look at your competition, you design your product, you design your marketing, you distribute it, and you bring it back to where you started. And how did we do? So basically, from number 8, in about 10 weeks, I think, Ajax grew to number 2. That's a big deal, because Tide's advertising budget is about 10 times as much as we had. So the customer is king. Who you're targeting is king. And I was sitting one day, 21-year-old me, and excited about all these processes, about working globally and all that stuff. And I was sitting and I'm like, wow, I just changed someone's behavior. I made someone buy something. How does that happen? That for me was way more than anything I learned in business school. How do you change behavior? And that became the most interesting part to me. It's not the bottom line. It's the fact that in the whole process, behavior was changed. So I want you now to think about what you do. All of us want to change behavior in some way. If you are, I go to Kelsey, a mission-driven organization like Thread, you want, the end goal is to change poverty. But then how do you change poverty? You want to change behavior in some way. And the way that you're doing it immediately is to make sure that people buy the products that employ the people of Haiti, right? You want to buy the moon bag. How do you make people buy the moon bag? When you're in a non-profit world, how do you make people donate? The behavior you want to change is apathy. So everyone wants to look at this person. Everyone wants to know what's in your target's head. And the thing that I learned is not about how to run teams, but one of the most valuable things I learned was how to listen. Listening is very, very important, and this is one thing that I will take with me forever. And the next part of my career was I moved to Pittsburgh, intending to go to Tepper, to business school, but it was the time of irrational exuberance. Millennials probably don't know what this means, but so tech companies in Pittsburgh were blowing up. And I found myself, I fell into technology. I worked for a consulting firm that worked with Safeguard Scientifics, which is an incubator out of Philly, and they had a lot of portfolio companies, and I worked out of the Pittsburgh office. Translated the same process that I learned in consumer goods to tech. And it was great, because a lot of the kids coming out then had great ideas, no real ideas on how to bring it to market. And then I worked for InnovationWorks. How many of you know InnovationWorks? And that was the first instance where I worked where profit was not the most important thing, right? You would argue that profit is not the most important thing nowadays with valuations, and I was like, what are these investors doing? Mission? The heck is a mission? It's all about the bottom line. How can you function without a bottom line? And this really piqued my interest. What's a mission? And so I decided, okay, maybe we'll go to the high school and deal with government stuff and nonprofit stuff, things that were very, very alien to me that I had no experience in. And it was amazing. It was great. I learned a lot of things. But this was still what was sticking to me. This never left me. And I realized that all these elements can be translated to something that's universal. The brand, your mission. If you're in the nonprofit world, if you're in advocacy, that's the essence of what you are. It's core. Your target market is still your target market. It could be the person you want to serve. It could be the donor. It could be the funder. Your competition is the alternative. What's the alternative without threat? Poverty, right? So that's how you look at it. Your product is your service. That's still your product. So how do you respond to what your target market wants and what the competition is doing, or the alternative? The advertising is your message that goes with your product, that talks to your target market. Distribution is still distribution. If that bag is not on the shelf when you want it, if it's not on the internet where it's ready to buy, Fred won't have sales, right? That's still very, very important. And then you reach your goal. Your mission, your target, your alternative, your product or service or message, how you get it to your target market makes you achieve your goal. So I realized after all this, I worked for a nonprofit after I graduated from Carnegie Mellon. I was CEO of a nonprofit. And I kind of went into it with this perspective. And it works. It works over and over again. It's translating not what we do, but how it serves you. And that's how you word everything. It's what is the benefit? What is the pain that we're trying to alleviate? What is the aspiration that we're trying to help you get to? That's how, it's not about talking about what you do. It's about talking about what you can do for your audience. And, I worked in nonprofit for a long time, but then realized that my passion really is in food, specifically in how it impacts our health, right? And so I focused my attention on this, doing the same kind of discipline, and you realize that there's many actors doing the same thing. So I would say that the food movement is the brand, right? Food movement is the mission. There's a lot of organizations that tackle this food issue, this health issue. And then this is the process, of a healthy food system, right? You grow food, you harvest, you transport it, you warehouse it, you market it, you get it to your consumer, they prepare it, they consume it, and then you get rid of the waste, and then hopefully you bring back some compost for growing again. Most of the initiatives, and this is not unique to the food movement, when you look at your own nonprofits, your own organizations, what you do, a lot of work is being done in terms of the product, in terms of crafting the message, and in terms of hopefully trying to get it to your target market, right? And in the food movement, that's very, very true. But not a lot of work is done in terms of actually changing behavior. So there's there's data loss. Because you kind of look like you're doing the right thing, but if it's not getting to the consumer, if you're not getting adoption, somewhere in your consideration of your target market, something was missing, right? Because something's not clicking. And then the competition, in the sense, instead of being tied, is all the other alternatives. So just to conjecture, if I was Coca-Cola and I talked to the consumer and said, okay, what is your pain point? Is it stains? Is it gentle on clothing? Do you want to make sure your child doesn't get chemicals on his skin? And then you message against that. But one of the key things that's very important is also why the consumer can't access you. And there's three things. We worked so hard working on the other stuff, but somehow it's the right product, but we forgot that people don't have time, they don't know how to cook this food that we're producing, and they feel like they can't afford it. And that's reinforced by the competition with saying, we make it easy, we are faster, and we are cheaper. So we're not thinking very competitively yet. And I think that's a lot, in terms of nonprofit work, that's what I see a lot. And I'm not saying that you should compete with other nonprofits in the sense that, there's not enough room for everyone. But there's a niche for everyone, there's a position for everyone that is unique, that will make you maximize what you're doing and be useful to your target market. So I think that's really the key. And I guess as an aside, 40% of what we produce, meaning the products, are wasted. So that's, in my head, that, okay, we produce like 10 tons of detergent, let's throw away 40 tons of it, 4 tons of it. And that doesn't work for margins, that doesn't work for bottom line, it's a lot of waste. So we work a lot on supply, not doing so much on demand. And when you look at that equation, it's actually a really balanced equation of supply and demand. So there's opportunity there. And I want you to, again, think of your nonprofits, think of your companies. Where is the opportunity? Are you listening to your target market? Are you listening to what they're really, really saying? When you have a difficulty, when you say that, okay, people are not giving, we're getting so much foundation money, we're not getting enough individual donations, and you ask yourself why. What do the individuals who want to give to you want? What do they want to feel? Is it, do they want to be just aware of the service? Are they looking to, you have to understand like what at their core they care about. So again, the mission is your brand. And making sure that you have enough insight, that you listen to your target market so that you understand what makes them really use you, what makes them really want you, what makes them change their behavior is the most important thing. I'm going to skip through this. So this guy is another guy I like to work with in terms of when I was working in technology, and he had one goal. So we've got to put a lot of money into changing behavior. A lot of times we focus a lot on what we feel the product should be because we are so mission driven, but we don't look at the other side of the equation in terms of how we can change behavior. And then finally, who knows this guy? Muhammad Yunus, right? Changes are products of intensive efforts. So I guess what I want to leave you with is the process of product management is something that is universal. There's no real difference, there shouldn't be, or at least there should be a big overlap between business school and nonprofit school. Because at the end of the day, you're talking to a person. And when you're talking to a person, you're not talking from your perspective. You want to talk from their perspective. And you want to understand what they want. And you may not have, millions and millions of dollars to pull 1,000 people for every little thing, but you always have time to listen. And you could take one group, you could take a small group out to lunch, you could do focus groups, but that's key every single time. And the companies that make a difference really know how to listen.